Hello everybody, happy Monday. Welcome to our Diversity and Inclusion in Cyber webinar today. This one, as you can see, is going to be focusing on bouncing back from burnout, so a really important issue that we want to address going into the new year. I hope you've all had a good morning and a good start to a week so far. Today we're joined by two wonderful speakers. So our host for today's session is Yulia Cherdantseva, who is a lecturer at the School of Computer Science and Informatics at Cardiff University. I'll hand over to Yulia shortly, but I just wanted to mention to you all our house rules or our etiquette for these webinars, that you will be on mute throughout the duration of the webinar, but we do want to make it as conversational and informative as possible. So just to let you know, this is a really safe space. Please do put your questions into us. We'll be touching on all sorts of different topics today related to burnout. You can also, if you really want to, ask questions anonymously. So do whatever's most comfortable for yourself, but do get in touch with us. We're hoping to have some really great discussion at the end of the talk. This is going to be recorded as well, so if you know someone who was unable to join today, or you'd like to watch this later on, if you're watching it in the background, then we'll be uploading the recording to our website. So anyone that has registered, we will share the link with you afterwards, certainly by the end of the week, if not before. So please do feel to pass this around to a friend or anyone that you feel could benefit from watching or listening to this webinar. We're more than happy for you to do that. We hope you enjoy it, and I'll hand over to Yulia to get us started.
Thank you, Sophie, and welcome everybody. Welcome to another webinar in this series on diversity and inclusion. So this webinar is organized by the Chartered Institute of Information Security and the Steering Committee Women in Cyber. So we are focusing on different aspects of diversity and inclusion, and today we have a very important topic, and we will be talking about bouncing back from a burnout, as Sophie has mentioned. And I have the honor to introduce our speaker for today. So it's Simon Lacey. Simon started his career in electrical engineering, and then he moved into information governance with the NHS, where he spent 11 years, and he was developing assurance frameworks, and which generally supported the delivery of patient care. Simon then worked with the private healthcare sector, and then he moved to the Bank of England, where he led the implementation of ISO 27001. Since 2018, Simon has been a freelance information security consultant, and he worked with very many well-known brands and organizations. So that all sounds as a very obviously successful career, but probably his path wasn't as straightforward as it may seem from the description that I gave you. So today, Simon will talk about the challenges that he experienced on his way, focusing on burnout, and the ways that he used to overcome those challenges. Simon, it's over to you now. Just to mention to the audience, as Sophie has said, so we would like to have it very interactive. Please do post your questions in the Q&A section, and we'll try to answer them throughout the discussion. Right, Simon, over to you now.
Hi, thanks, Julia. That's a very flattering introduction. I'm glad I've got filters on. I might be going red if I hadn't got those on. Yeah, thanks for joining today. This is I guess a highly personal account of things that worked for me from bouncing back from, I guess it was a fairly bleak place. I don't for one moment claim to be a psychologist or a psychiatrist with professional qualifications in this area. This is just my journey, and these are things that work for me. And I think I kind of vowed to be quite open about this when this struck me, because to be honest, we don't talk about this stuff enough, and there's nothing inherently weak or anything to be ashamed about having mental health challenges. I haven't got the stats in front of me, but most people will encounter some kind of challenges in their life where things aren't going quite as they'd like to, and we would talk about a broken leg or a broken arm without thinking twice about it, but to say we were struggling about something is something we don't do so often. And I think there's a reason for the photo in the background there. One, it's a place I love going and love going walking, but secondly, I think it symbolizes hope. And I think this, having been through burnout doesn't have to be a life-defining moment in a bad way. For me, it's definitely been a life-defining moment, but in a hugely positive way. And I hope that comes across now, that even if you're feeling yourself today, joining this call and feeling pretty terrible about life in general. But actually, that doesn't mean to say that it's always going to be that way. This could be a really positive experience to build on and move forward. But I think to give a little bit of context for me and how it started. Well, actually, isn't how it started. Actually, it's how it became obvious it was a problem. It was a Monday morning. I hadn't been sleeping well for a number of weeks. 2 or 3 hours was probably about as good as it got. Bit of self-medicating to try and get some sleep with that too. I was facing an 1.5 hour drive to go and spend a day interviewing for people to join my team. And my partner commented that the whole bed was shaking as I got up. And I was 2 weeks from holiday. Now, I didn't realize at the time that the reason the bed was shaking is because I was shaking. So in essence, the bed was shaking because it was me. And I mumbled something along the lines of, I can't do this anymore. And it really was the end. It was the buffers that I'd hit. And I look about that, and I suppose it's always coincidental that I've used a black and white photo and lots of grey there, because that's kind of how life felt at that particular moment in time. And this is how my life, this is what my work life looked like. Actually, I shouldn't say my life because it wasn't my life, but that was how my work life looked like. And again, it's quite intentional to use the photo there. That was kind of how my thinking was at the time. It was a mess. I was working 7 days a week. I was routinely responding to communications at sort of 10 o'clock plus at night. Every day would have 150 plus emails without fail. I was managing a team across a fairly large geographical area, all of which who were also under a huge amount of pressure. And we were going through a huge organizational change, which, you know, as we all know, significant change in life tends to lead to stress anyway. But it was horrible. And I suppose perhaps a little bit unfairly said it's inadequate management support. Well, there really wasn't any management support because all the managers were also going through the same change and facing the same challenges that I was having. And this really led to set of feelings here that and again, I'm not going to sit there and read them all out because you can see them on screen. But my thinking was incredibly bad. Everything was negative, everything was cynical. And actually, when I put this slide together and then Googled the Mind website, and it was talking about symptoms of burnout, it was kind of that list, which in some ways was quite comforting, I suppose. But complete exhaustion from not sleeping, unable to start tasks because I knew I wouldn't finish them, unable to plan. And when I hit this rock bottom, I was fortunate enough to be able to go and talk to a GP very quickly the same day to help turn things round. However, you know, I've written on the bottom there in 3 words, above all, I was broken. And I was trying to think of perhaps a more eloquent way of describing that, but I think that actually does the job. I was personally broken by that point. I wasn't the person that I wanted to be, and I wasn't the person I really recognized when I stared back from the mirror. And it was that thought that although my holiday was only 2 weeks away, I could see no way I could move from the point I was at to the holiday. There was just no way out for me. I felt so trapped and helpless and completely out of control, just total overwhelm. Now, some of you listening to this today may identify with some or all of those. Now, I suspect that I was probably a fairly extreme case in terms that it had gone on for so long that without me acting on it, my partner would have been saying several times that, you know, you can't go on like this, Simon. This is too much. There's something not right here. But of course, you know, stiff upper lip, keep going. It'll be fine. We'll drive through. I'll get to my holiday, and 2 weeks off will miraculously change how I feel about my life. Well, of course, in reality, that's not true. And I'd love if any of you out there have felt any of those things. It'd be great if you were to drop that in the chat anonymously. However, at the time, that's a hugely uncomfortable place to be. I can't sit there and say that being burnt out was pleasant. It wasn't. I remember sitting in my lounge in tears, thinking that I would never ever work again, and that was honestly how I felt about myself. But with the benefit of hindsight, I look at this photo, and this photo says an awful lot to me. And I took this quite recently, actually, on the lead up to Christmas. that actually it was the start of what became a huge transformation of my life, when actually I stopped living an unhappy life and started learning the skills to build a better life. And I suppose it's a sort of truism from mental health or from burnout that the good news is that it's all on you to start changing your life. The bad news is it's all on you to start changing your life. And if I think about now with the benefit of the years' experience that's gone, and that was very true for me. But it was also the start of if you like, this is the sunrise over the children's, a new day, and it's beautiful. And one of the key moments for me, that's my little girl when she was about, I think, 7. And it's funny, we carry this burden around with us as adults that of how life should be and how we should respond to things. And a lot of that is social programming or how we've been brought up or cultural influence, etc. While I was off work sick, and I was off sick for 6 months in total, as I was walking my little girl to school, which is one of the few pleasures I really had at that time. And she said to me, "Daddy, you should do a job where you're happy and you don't work all the time." And when you tear away all the preconceptions that we carry around with us about what life should be like, that says it all. That's everything. And again, how many of us could think about that as a statement? Are we happy in our job and are we working all the time? And obviously, if you love working all the time, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, because some people throw themselves into their careers, and that's not a criticism, as long as you're happy doing it. And if you're not happy doing it, are you going to be able to make those adjustments to your life? So I have my little girl to thank for prompting these changes, really, because I went away and started thinking about lots of things, how I used to talk to her about aspiration in life and having a life that you're proud of and that you're happy in, and then realized that I was incredibly hypocritical, really, because I was living a life that wasn't authentic to me. I was fulfilling a jelly mold of what other people thought my life should look like. So I should go and put a suit on and go to work. And I should sit at a desk processing information and tapping on a keyboard 9 to 5 and then going home and working in the evenings. I thought that's what I should be doing. And actually, would I want that life for my daughter? And I kind of realized I wouldn't. So I had to then go into, sorry, I'm just moving on the slide, slight pause there, of what my first steps to recovery were. Now, my first thing, and the Mind website actually does these in a slightly different order, and I'm not saying that they're wrong and I'm right, but this is the order I approached it because I had got to quite a bad point. I had to seek help because I wasn't going to see a way through my problems on my own. I just simply wasn't in a position to be able to do that. I was too broken to be able to do that. I was too broken to be able to think rationally about what I needed to do next. And there is a plethora of support out there. And I think part of the problem is that when we're in this really low place, that actually we don't see what help's out there. We're unable to see what's helped out. We think it's just us. We think we're alone in what we're doing. And really, we're not alone. There are people that have. I was hugely fortunate that I was able to get a GP appointment that morning. And the GP's reaction was, "Simon, you're not well. We need to do something here." And the great thing was there was no requirement for any medication for this. It was just that, and just the fact that someone listened to me made a huge. I was probably sat in that appointment for, well, it felt like eternity, but I was certainly in there far longer than the 6 minutes or 4 minutes, or whatever we get allocated to go to see a GP. I was in there a long while, but the response was really positive. We can talk to our line manager again if you have the right relationship with your line manager. Again, not everyone has. And I've probably stressed this a number of times through this session. What worked for me might not work for you. and you might have a different take on things. So your line manager might not be somebody you'd like to approach to talk about how you're feeling, but equally it might be perfectly fine that they're really receptive to that, or there might be somebody else in the organisation. There might be friends who you can talk to, and of course there's all the free information on the internet and the Mind website. I've put the links out. I mean, if you've not looked at it, I would highly recommend that you do so, because that might give you some actually help and support, or some information that will help you support somebody you know who's perhaps struggling too. Because so a friend might talk to you and you might not know what to say. So there's lots of good stuff out there. And a number of people said to me it was courageous to seek help. I don't see it as courageous at all. I just had to. There was nowhere else for me to go. But please, if you are struggling, don't think that you can't talk to people, because that's huge. Was hugely important in my recovery. I had to break the cycle. So the initial spell of 6 months off, my employer gave me a number of counselling sessions, which were a safe space for me to talk about how I was feeling. And again, maybe it's quite stereotypical to say this, but sort of a middle-aged guy. Let's not talk about our feelings, because it's not what we do. But a safe space where you can just say how you're feeling was hugely beneficial to me. But it gave me a chance to break that cycle. There was no way I was going to recover by continuing to do what I was already doing, i.e. this cycle of work. I had to escape that cycle. Now again, if you understand where you are sooner, I guess you may not need to do that. But for me, I'd got to the point where I had to someone had to take me out of that cycle to allow me to heal and rest. And I think this is something that there's almost been sort of some assumption that during the COVID days, particularly, that actually, if we're working from home, etc., that somehow we're getting more rest. My experience of that is quite different. People have tended to work harder, and we're missing out on the coffee conversations in the morning, and the conversation at the water cooler, and the banter about football, or just a simple discussion about what we did the weekend. And just thinking that Yulia and I, and Sophie, when we joined the call, we had a chat about our weekends, which is something we've had to strip from us because of restrictions we've had to change. But you need to plan in that time. You need to get sleep, plan downtime, and switch off. So again, how many times you hear, I haven't got time to take holiday. Well, actually, if you haven't got time to take a holiday, then you need to plan some time to give yourself a chance to recover if you're not taking your breaks. It's so important as people to take our time out. And so those three things were really the first priority. So in terms of my rest, I would get up and I would sleep, because I knew I was out of the environment. I would start to sleep better. I might go to bed at midnight. I might sleep for 12 hours. That wasn't always unusual, but I would always try and get up for my daughter to have breakfast with her and walk her to school or whatever too, or walk her home from school, whichever one I was going to do. But I would go and sleep during that. So I needed to rest. I needed to build up my resources again, because I had nothing to fight with anymore. So those things really worked for me. And it was kind of this point that I knew I had to change my life. And actually, I wrote this title here, and I decided to change my life. Actually, I suppose that's not right, really. I decided to change myself. It's probably a more accurate way of describing the process, in so much that my life wasn't serving me well. I wasn't living an authentic life. I was living a life that was causing a huge amount of unhappiness, and almost unhappiness. You can, as we know, enthusiasm and laughter is infectious. If you go to a comedy show or whatever, and one person starts laughing, people tend to join in. It's hugely infectious. But equally, negativity and burnout is infectious too. And I almost think of it as a glass of water and dropping some ink into it and how it spreads. So I became quite aware my unhappiness was spreading to those around me, those that I care of. So I had to change myself. And I wouldn't claim for one moment that's easy, but these are just steps that I took to make my life better. Again, these came much later than just after I was gone into that's almost the first aid stage where I needed to rest, needed to break the cycle. This comes sometime later. But I was aware that I needed to do that. And absolutely fundamental to that, and it was quite a painful thing to me, is to realize that where I was in my life was on me, in essence, and how I'd allowed myself to become, and that my mindset was really, really unhelpful in living the kind of life that I wanted to live and I wanted my family to have. And I think about this quote quite a lot: change your mindset, change your life. And at this time, it was I made a real conscious effort, almost overnight, to start replacing the negative things in my life with positive things. So I started listening to lots and lots of positive podcasts. So things like Rich Roll, for example, which I'd recommend. And there was lots of stuff in there that was really, I had really conventional thinking about my life. And this stuff was really challenging my thinking and opening up a world of possibility, really. I started reading positive books. So this is one book that this book is absolutely not for everyone. It's fairly base language. Well, it's not fairly base language. It is base language in there, but I found incredibly helpful in terms of rebuilding who I am. An ex-Navy SEAL who turned his life around, etc. And that's really, really not the kind of books I tend to read, but it had a powerful impact on me. I stopped watching the news. The news was incredibly corrosive to me. So I ended up worrying about things like, I don't know, financial crisis, wars somewhere else in the globe. And actually, what can I do to manage a financial crisis? What can I do to manage down a pandemic? I can only control what's in my life. I can't control how other people are behaving. And stepping back away from news was absolutely life-changing. And again, anybody listening today, if you want to try and change, just don't listen to the news for a week. And my mates think it's hilarious that when we talk about COVID restrictions, I don't even know what the latest guidance is half the times, because I don't engage with the news. I just don't realize what's going on. And as I went through this process of filling my life with much more positive things and much more positive thinking, I realized I really had, I come across this model, and again, I guess most of you have heard of this. It's quite common that people talk about it these days, but a fixed versus a growth mindset. And in many ways, I look at that fixed mindset was how I lived my life. I saw very much that a failure was a limit, was the limit of my abilities. I'd either be good at something or I'm not. I don't like challenge. I want to be comfortable. That my ability that I have now is the limit of my ability forever. And when you start down this burnout cycle, which you're disappearing, you're circling the drain, going down and down and down, this stuff, I would have argued with you that this stuff is absolutely true, that absolutely we have a fixed mindset. Absolutely, my own potential for my life is predetermined. I can't change it. I can't influence it positively. But when I started realizing that there was this model out there, and I forget for the moment who the lady's name is, but when I flipped it on its head and started looking at growth, and I'm acutely aware I probably come across as some old hippie, but I realized that actually this growth mindset is the flip side of that, and that's what I was starting to do. I was starting to look at things in a much more positive way, and that actually a challenge makes you stronger, and that if you do new things, you will grow more resilient. And maybe I sound incredibly naive that I thought that. As someone who's neurodivergent, I'm dyslexic, and life tends to be quite hard around things like organisation, etc., and planning and stuff. Maybe that was just how I felt, and I absolutely thought that was normal to have a fixed mindset. I didn't realize there was any other options, and that probably sounds to people who listen to this are completely naive. But however, I worked it out eventually, which is better than not working out at all. I started to practice mindfulness, and I told some friends of mine that I was going to start doing meditation and stuff, and they looked at me with this like, oh, what on earth has happened to you, Simon? However, again, I can't stress how helpful that's been to me. And I've just mentioned there is a timer called Insight Timer app. It's free on Android and iOS, which gives you access to thousands and thousands of different meditations. And some of them might be spiritual, some of them can be religious based if that's the thing you want to look at, but other things can be just things like body scans, etc. And you can do ones that are a minute long, you can do ones that are an hour and a half long, whichever works for you. Now I know that whatever happens in my day, I've got 10 minutes of that meditation, 10 minutes calm in my life. No matter what is going on, I've got 10 minutes at least. And as the old saying says, if you haven't got 10 minutes to meditate, you need to do 20. And it's a real place, safe place for me to go, okay, fine, whatever's going on. And I just found that so helpful to calm my mind from what's going on. I started practicing yoga. I'm slightly ungainly when it comes to my yoga, but it works for me. And there's two I recommended there that might be useful: Yoga with Adrian or with Sarah Beth are on YouTube. So again, there's stuff you can do free in your lounge. And again, they can be 5 minutes, they can be half an hour, they can be an hour. And again, you think about your breathing and you think about your stretching, and you think about how you're holding your body, which takes you out of your worry and away from your worry, and actually, again, builds self-esteem and confidence. I felt confident. And when I started telling people I did meditation, I was starting to be confident that I was just being me. And various breathing exercises. I've mentioned Wim Hof there, who's the Iceman. Apparently, there's going to be a major film about him being made later this year. Go and check him out on YouTube. I'm not suggesting that everyone wants to live their life, but he does some great stuff in terms of taking you out of your day-to-day stresses. And I went, I think, nearly 2 years in terms of everyday meditation, and I've been doing it for about 4 or 5 years. But and then I forgot one day because I nipped out to meet a friend for a drink, and I didn't come home till late. But there you go. I've found the power of gratitude to be really good for me. And again, it does come across as really new age and whatever, but it can be as simple as sitting on the train, commuting to work, and just thinking about how great it is the train turned up on time, you've got a seat, and that you're going to see one of your favourite colleagues for a meeting or a coffee later on that day. That can be gratitude. I would sit quite often on the back step in the garden with a coffee or a tea, and I would be grateful that I was outside with the sun and the wind and all the rest of it, and I was just grateful for that. And again, it took me away from the negative pressure I was feeling on my life at that time. And spend time in nature. This is a wood that I love walking in. It's amazing. It's stunningly beautiful. On this particular day, it was frosty morning. You can see the mist as the earth is all warming up. But we often say, oh, I can't go out for a walk today because it's raining. Doesn't matter. Go out in the rain. And some of my best walks have come when I've been in that wood on a rainy, cold day. You can hear the rain pitter-pattering on your jacket. And again, all your worries tend to dissolve. And this particular place doesn't have mobile phone signal, so I can't actually listen. I can't actually be distracted from anything. I don't get emails. I don't get notifications about anything. My phone doesn't ring. I'm out there, and it's just me and nature. And I'll see woodpeckers, and I'll see deers, and I'll see other animals. And I'll see dog walkers, and you'll say good morning, and it's all good stuff, whatever the weather. And move often. So I sat there and decided I'd like to do some exercise, which itself was hilarious at that time, because I'd convinced myself I was naturally fit, naturally healthy, which of course we know is just delusion, really. So I thought, what's the hardest exercise that I can do? And the hardest thing I could think of was running, because I hated it. I hated running. I was rubbish at running at school. I'd be the lad who was at the back of the cross country, probably digging up potatoes to throw at people and stuff through the fields in Suffolk where I lived. And I went for a jog around the block, and I came home and I couldn't do 1K, and I was embarrassed about how I was. And so I've been on a journey of learning to, well, I suppose learning to run, and it's gone on for a number of years. And I did the virtual London Marathon last year. I've got a place on the Berlin Marathon this year, and I've run a couple of half marathons and stuff. And I love this photo because for me, this is resilience. I shouldn't have run this race. I was injured. And if you look in the background there, you'll see the first aid bike, because I was last by a mile. And you know what? I didn't care. And that's why I'm laughing, because I realized that she was circling like a vulture, waiting for me to keel over the speed I was going at. But I ran around this National Trust property last in the rain and the cold on a Sunday, at 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning. But I did it, and I got the medal to prove it. And that's resilience. That's being resilient. That's what changing that mindset means, and actually going into a growth mindset. Now, running is not for everyone. It might be cycling. It might be a walk around the block. So even at my lowest, I would go for a walk around the block every day, no matter what, because that's so fundamental to being healthy and dealing, building resilience and helping have a healthy mind. If you don't do that, that's not a great place to be. Even better if you're doing it out in nature, in the rain and the snow, etc. I decided that, so the picture on the left here, which I love that picture. I was injured and I really shouldn't have been running, but we had a snow day last year. So it started to snow, so I rushed around to get ready to get out in the snow on a Sunday morning. And it was amazing. Hardly anyone around, freezing cold, the wind was blowing, snow all over my hat and my beard and my eyebrows, on the eyelashes. And I've never felt more alive than that moment. And this is all part of me building resilience. Resilience doesn't happen by chance. You can't think your way to resilience, in my experience. You build resilience layer on layer like an onion. And it's a number of steps that you do just to, it's doing the things you don't necessarily want to do, but will make you feel good afterwards. So part of the Wim Hof thing is about cold exposure. So I've got into, I can't believe I'm telling the world this, but I'm showering outside in the garden, and I have an ice bath in the garden too. And the middle photo there was, I think the lowest it's gone, I think that's about 2.5 degrees. So what comes out your tap is between 10 and 20 degrees, your cold tap. It got about 2.5 degrees. So I went and leapt into, cracked the ice and then leapt into this, well, what my other half calls a paddling pool, and sitting there for a few minutes. It sounds horrific, and when you first step in, it's a real challenge. I won't deny that. But actually how you feel when you come out is something I cannot describe. And obviously make sure if you want to try it, you do it safely, because it can be damaging. But it's such an amazing experience to feel yourself in that environment. So again, you have to meditate. So I sit in there and I watch the red kites that fly over my house. I watch the squirrels in the tree behind. There's a little robin that comes out and quite often comes to see me when I'm in there, or if I'm having a hosepipe shower in the garden. The robin will come and see, because I'm making the ground wet and it's easy for him to get his grubs out of the ground. And he tells me off when he wants me to go indoors and stuff. And so I get to experience nature too. And it's doing something that sucks every day. It's when you've done that I have a mental battle very often when I get in. When you've done it, you've built that. I've built another layer of my resilience. So actually, it makes stuff more easy as I go on. So every day, a little bit more resilience goes on the pile. And I love it. It feels amazing. If that's going to have a cold shower today, trust me, you'll love it. And I started putting myself into positions, thinking about what challenges I'd like to do. So one of my biggest challenges was turning around and saying, I'm gonna quit working at the Bank of England, and do something else without a plan. And I figured I'd grow my wings on the way down, because you only get confident by doing new stuff. You don't gain confidence by doing. You can't think your way to confidence or resilience. It's only by what you do that you become confident and resilient. So planning new challenges and goals. So one of them was I really wanted to go work abroad on a project. Having never worked abroad, I got the opportunity to go and work in Canada just for COVID, which was an amazing experience. And I'm not a very good swimmer, and I was petrified of open water swimming. So I went to the Essex coast and leapt in a seawater lake. so a saltwater lake, and spent an hour in there, complete with a ridiculous swimming cap. One of my biggest fears through the whole of my life has been heights. So last year I climbed the O2, and this is a picture of me just about to go on to Go Ape. Go Ape was petrifying, but again, I did it as a tick in the box. It was something to push that fear back. And I use a term here about pushing back on life. And I was talking to somebody about it this morning, actually, about the comfort zone. Now, when you're going through burnout, what you think is the comfort zone gets smaller and smaller and smaller until it's really a little speck. So you don't want to do anything outside this bandwidth here. And of course, that's not conducive to a good life. And it's not healthy either. So by pushing resilience, you push that and make that comfort zone bigger. Because the comfort zone is you don't grow in the everything comes out, all growth comes the other side of the comfort zone. You need to learn new skills, and they might not be physical things like this. It might be learning a new language, or it might be taking up a new hobby, doing something that pushes yourself completely into another direction. So push back on life and make your life bigger. It makes you so much more resilient. I've got a final slide here. I'm not quite sure how we're doing for time, but I've got a final slide here.
Yes, we have about 4 minutes for you, and then I'll jump in with my questions.
Well, I can talk really slowly through this slide for 4 minutes then. And this maybe looks a bit macho and a bit, and maybe that's, a picture of Goggins is kind of is. And if you look at David Goggins, you'll see that the guy is bonkers, running 100 miles in the desert and stuff. But the most important conversation is the one that you have with yourself. That narrative, and was it 60,000 thoughts a day we have or something? That you carry around in your head all day, 24 hours a day, you carry that around in your head. If that narrative you're telling yourself is fixed mindset, i.e., I'm a failure, I'm not very good, I can't achieve, I'll never learn new things, you absolutely believe that. And I spent a whole life in that mode. My head was telling, oh, you're not good enough, you can't do this, you couldn't achieve that. I told myself I couldn't run. Well, clearly I've proved to myself that I can run. And I'm not, this session is not about saying, hey, Simon the superhero or anything like that, because I'm clearly not. I'm just a normal guy trying to make the best of my life. But we're capable of so much more than we tell ourselves that we are. We tell ourselves can't so often. I can't draw. I hear that so often. I can't draw. Well, you can't draw yet, because you can learn to draw. I mean, Yulia's a lecturer, teaches people how to do risk, as we were just talking before this webinar about risk assessment and risk management. The people who come there can't do risk management, but when they finish the course, they can do risk management. We can learn new things, and it's about that what we play through our head every day. And that's so important. I think about this quote so often when I'm running, etc. If I'm having a bad day, well, actually, what am I telling myself here? That I will fail, or am I telling myself I'm going to go out there and try? And it's just so important for me. And I'm sure there's lots of people out there that do have this issue with, and it can come from being neurodiverse, it can come through an unhappy family life. I mean, mine certainly wasn't, but difficulties in family life, childhood, whatever. Being dyslexic, my teachers told me that I was thick at school, because in the 70s we didn't bother to worry about things like dyslexia. We just told kids they were thick and expect them to go and find a rubbish job somewhere. So really my whole life has been about that. And actually when you realize that, it's a smell in the coffee moment in terms of a cliche. So hopefully that's just a few thoughts. I don't expect anyone to go and go, well, I'm going to do exactly all these things, but they might just get you to think about your challenge might be learning to knit. I've bought a skipping rope for some bizarre reason, because I have got no clue how to skip. So I want to teach myself how to skip. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to give it a go. I might be able to do 2 or 3 skips, and that'd be perfect. I'm not going to be standing like Muhammad Ali or anything. But it might be something like that. Or you might want to go and just watch a comedy show that you've never done before. Just push back on those things in life to help build up that resilience. And enjoy the journey. Hey, we're only here for a relatively short space of time, so why not enjoy it while we're here?
Brilliant. Thank you, Simon. Thank you for sharing your inspirational story. And I think it really sets a good example for everybody who may be experiencing similar issues in their professional lives as well. And you've sent so many powerful messages so far, and so many good pieces of advice. So I wanted to discuss maybe a little bit in greater detail. So this importance of understanding yourself and your own condition. And you mentioned dyslexia and being neurodivergent. So how did that understanding maybe prompted you into that transformational experience?
Being diagnosed at 48 with dyslexia, I still, in fact, it was actually the anniversary. It was only only last week. I remember walking out of the assessment with my hands made into fists because I was angry, and I'm not a particularly angry person generally. And I was angry not because I was dyslexic. I was angry because it'd been great to have known this 40 years ago. And it was a golden key moment. Now, I remember going home and I was talking to my partner about it. And so I said, oh, with this curse of dyslexia. And again, a lot of this stuff plays into that. It's actually, well, I'm putting myself down that I'm lesser. I'm dyslexic, I'm not defective. And when I started to realize that actually by saying it's a curse, it's this, it's that, was the wrong way of looking at it. And it made so much sense of the other things I struggle with, like the corporate world, like fitting into a corporate framework, being part of that jelly mold of working in an office somewhere. I realized it made sense of that. It made sense of things I used to feel bad about, much struggling to plan and concentrate. I mean, dyslexia is a hugely complex thing. It's not just about not being able to read very well. I can read quite well, actually, but it's slow processing and stuff. So it really was almost that golden moment. That was, it came some way down the journey, but it was hugely powerful in terms of going, actually, I'm Simon Lacey. I'm spent most of my life trying to be somebody else and not understanding why I can't relate to things in quite the same way as others. So it was key to that.
Yeah, I think that was a very important moment. And the next question I have is, how did this transformation affected your family and your daughter? So you mentioned your daughter as somebody who really kind of pushed you towards that transformation. But when you are in your new state, so how it affects your family now?
I think you should ask them that. My little daughter, who's now 15 and nearly as tall as me, well, weirdly, she was diagnosed with autism not that long ago, having spent some time in hospital and it made sense of everything else. And my partner described me as being quite new agey to somebody the other day, and I wasn't sure I should be offended or take it as a compliment, but I took it as a compliment because it's the better way to look at it. We have a much better family life now than we've ever had. So we decided 2 weeks ago that, having had to cancel 2 weddings because of COVID, that what dates have you got free? And they said this date in March, and we're now getting married in 10 weeks. So planning a wedding in 10 weeks is slightly fun. But that's a sign of how much better our life is, because if that had been suggested before I'd been through this process, there is no way I'd be like, oh, that's too soon, we can't do that, it's too much. We're now going, yeah, great, this will be fun. And okay, it might not be perfect. We might not have it the way that a traditional wedding might be, but we'll still have a great celebration of our life. So I think, and it's made me a better parent. There is no doubt I'm much more patient. I'm much more relaxed about things. You know, if anyone is watching this today and has a neurodivergent child, or somebody I know has got a child, you know, you need patience. Things don't always go to a set plan, and it's made me a better person, I think. You know, I don't know what their take. My other half was absolutely horrified when I'm having a conversation with our neighbour at the old house. I'm stood there and there's snow on the ground, and I'm having a shower in the garden, chatting to my neighbour over the fence, and I walked indoors and my other half said, "That's just so embarrassing." Didn't you ask you what you were doing? I said, no. So yeah, I think if you're more authentic, the people around you are going to be happier. I don't see how that can not be the case, to be honest, Julia.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that sounds like it made not only your life, but the life of people around you better. I'm sure that you are a brilliant role model for your daughter as well. So because it's so great to see a person who is positive and open-minded about things. And yeah, excellent.
No, thank you. It's funny you mention that, because my daughter was she struggles a bit with anxiety, and she was upset going out the front door for school, and she loves school, does well, but she really enjoys school, got great friends and all the rest of it. No issues there, great support from the school too, I hasten to add. And she was really anxious about going to school, and I just said to her, every time you stand up to your anxiety, you get stronger and your anxiety gets weaker. And that's how you have to manage it. And that's not saying that every time you can face up to anxiety, because clearly sometimes you just don't feel you're strong enough to do that. But every time you take a positive step, you actually make that anxiety weaker, and you stronger to face that down. And I think, you know, some people probably think I'm a bit harsh that I push her to do some of these things, because actually that's how you build your resilience. Sitting in your room on your iPad is never going to make you resilient.
Yeah, having that experience, your own experience, you can now help other people, and your daughter included, to make that important transformation and understanding yourself and understanding your anxiety and maybe burnout issues as well, and trying to deal with them. Simon, I wanted to take you in a slightly different direction now and talk about maybe organizations and employers. So you already mentioned your line manager, but maybe you can expand on that. So how can organizations help their employees to understand maybe themselves, to understand the issues they have, and to deal with them?
That's a great question. That's probably 2 hours worth of conversation in itself, really. Again, there's the Mind website has got some good pointers here for people who manage teams and staff. Organizations have a responsibility to their staff. You will never get good work from a burnt out employee. And in fact, a burnt out employee is hugely corrosive to the environment. I look back now, and actually my presence towards the end was not helpful to my colleagues at all. And that's quite a painful thing to admit, but you know, that is where we are. So organizations have that duty, and some organizations are much better at this than others, and obviously some are very good. I think particularly during COVID, where we've expected people who perhaps, you know, I've just got a friend of mine in mind right now who loves to be in an office around people. That's where he gets his energy from. Working from home has been really tough, and we were talking about it at the weekend, actually, really tough for him, because that's not what he gets his energy from. So organizations, you know, line managers need to acknowledge that people are different. So some people bring their whole self to work, and that's absolutely okay. Some people might not want to, and that's equally okay. It's what suits for people. But for me, the key things that would have been really helpful to me is having a line manager that spots when something was not right. So I needed saving for myself. I know it's my account, I'm accountable for my life, but I needed somebody to help me give that break. I needed somebody to tell me that I had to go home and get some help. And spot things. So if a model employee is now coming in late, for example, or looks a bit disheveled, or is really down about things, or is really negative in team meetings, they're really important things to spot. Because if someone who's been previously a great, it might be they've got issues at home, that, you know, might have their child might be ill, their mother might be ill, or whatever it might be, and they might want someone to reach out and just go, hey, you know, you don't seem quite yourself, are you okay? And just have that conversation and just build those bridges. And it's really important in teams to realise that everyone's different. Now, I've managed football teams at a relatively decent standard. Some players want to kick up the backside, and they respond to that and want to be shouted at. Other players need an arm put around their shoulder, and it's no different in your team in the office. Now, I'm not advocating you go and kick your staff up the backside, by the way, but just having that connection that you can do that and actually give people signposts, and even generally without a problem say, hey guys, you know, there's the Mind website or other websites to support. Just have a read of this when you get a minute when you're having a coffee, or just make a one-to-one more about a chat. How was your weekend? Rather than not deliver against your objectives. It's so important. Lots of organizations now do that employee-enabled programs, enabled employees, or whatever programs they're called, where there's counseling, etc. there. Promote those if you've got teams. If you'll ask your organization if you've got them. But help support people to manage, because I did say to somebody the other day, it's a moral obligation. They pointed out to me it was not just a moral obligation, it's also a delivery of your performance of your team problem. I was out of the picture for 6 months. So the team was one guy down for 6 months, plus the lead up to that where I really wasn't that helpful to getting good stuff done.
Yeah, so I have 2 follow-up questions. So I'll mention both of them, so whatever order you'd like to take them. So the first one is productivity. So you've made so many changes to your life, to your kind of personal life, and probably the work-life balance has changed. How's that? How the productivity has been affected? And the second question is on the COVID. So you've mentioned that kind of spotting those initial issues with employees is important. But when you're online, so it's probably so much harder to pick up an issue. So those 2 questions on productivity and the COVID and kind of online working.
Productivity. Well, being freelance suits me. So I've managed to build. So part of my issues with dyslexia is concentration span. So it's, hey, I've managed to sit in the same place for an hour, which is a bit of a record today in this webinar. But productivity has gone up. I'm more productive because I'm happier, and I pick and choose the work that I do, and I do it in the way that I want to do it. So I might work for 20 minutes, then might go and sit in the garden with a cup of tea, or I might go and do a few stretches of the yoga, or I might go and meditate, or I might go and walk on the block, or whatever. That's my approach to work, and it works for me. Sitting at a desk for 9 till 5 does not work for me, and it never did. And I was never happy doing that. But my productivity is better because I'm happier. So I'm able to bring richness to my work. And hey, if you're freelance, I also pick and choose what I do. So therefore, I always pick hard jobs because I learn something from it, even if it's challenging to do that. So productivity is much better, and I think in the workplace it's much better if you help staff to manage their days in a way that suits them. And hey, if you're working, obviously we've gone beyond that hopefully now, but if you've got kids at home, etc., and you're trying to work, and I'm lucky enough I've got a house, but if you're a small flat and you've got a child and you've had to isolate and the TV's on, that's really tough. And organisations should be empathetic to that. Somebody who sat there and their child's unhappy because there's COVID in the house and they're isolating, they might have to catch up on their emails in the evening, and that's absolutely fine. Not for all jobs, of course, some of the jobs need to be 9 to 5, but if they're able to be a bit more flexible, that really helps. Well, sorry, what was the question about COVID? Oh, spotting.
Yeah, so how organizations and maybe line managers, what should they do? How could those things be done online? So when you don't see a person over coffee in the morning, so you can't really see if they're experiencing issues.
Yep. And obviously that's a huge challenge for all of us with families and stuff during the height of the pandemic. I'm doing a contract in the NHS right now. My line manager, she's great. She's a lovely lady, known her for a number of years. The one-to-ones we have, we quite often go, oh, actually, we've got 10 minutes to go. We better talk about some work now. And then it'll be, okay, what have you been up to? So your one-to-ones you have for your staff don't have to be, what did you do last week? What are you doing next week? They can be, so what did you get up to the weekend then? Oh, actually, I went cycling in the woods. Oh, brilliant. What woods were those? And it can just be, and again, I know not all line managers are good at that. And I get it. I'm quite comfortable having those conversations. Not everybody else is. But learning those skills is really, really helpful. And we talk about them soft skills, but they're almost fundamental skills now. People expect those kind of conversations. Just some virtual coffee mornings. And again, a virtual coffee morning is nowhere as much fun as a normal coffee morning. But when we weren't able to meet together, just coming together and talk about a topic that might be partly work related, and people talk and engage, and and every time you have a laugh about it too, because somebody will say something and it's funny, and you just have a laugh and it raises the mood. And I've also been part of some things like just some quizzes and stuff. And again, they're all a bit cliche, but to be honest, but actually you're breaking that barrier down a little bit, and you're just allowing people to be social in a way that they would be in an office in a slightly unusual environment. And then you'll spot how people are. I know it's not easy. And I don't know if I've got just time for no,
I think we have time for the last and final question, and then I'll pass it over to Sophie. So we have a question in the chat from Steve, and I think it's a tough question to answer. So what you've described as a psychologically safe environment that should be kind of supported by the organization. But do you have any suggestions for how to get through this if the organization isn't supportive?
Can I give an honest answer? I wouldn't want to work for an organisation that wasn't supportive, because it wouldn't work for me. Now, again, I have to acknowledge other people's situations, and thanks for the question, Steve. That's a great question. Supportive management, you can get your support from other people than just management at work. You might have a peer that you get on well with, and we all, you know, I'm supposed to be sat here and thought about somebody at work we've really enjoyed working with in our life. We're always somebody. And that might be that person you can get some support, and you can support each other. And it doesn't have to be quite as grand as supporting each other. It might be, hey, let's make time for a coffee this week, or let's have a Zoom call at some point this week. And it might be a chat. You might be sharing pictures of your cycle ride at the weekend or whatever. I would always encourage organisations, if you feel confident enough, to try and encourage organisations to be better at supporting people. But that, if you're starting to burn out, one, you're not going to have the energy for that. And two, they're not going to be able to respond quickly enough to be able to help you, really. I find it quite hard that if organisations, I would find it so hard to be an organisation that doesn't support. And I've seen, if you look on LinkedIn, you'll see lots of organisations that are hugely supportive of their staff, and they deserve to have the best talent, in my opinion, because they look after you and want you to do the best job you're able to do. And let's be honest, we all want to work for nice people. But sometimes we need people to drive us a bit, but we want to work for people that want us to be the best that we're able to be.
Absolutely. Thank you, Simon. I totally agree that having that support from your organization and your line manager is extremely important, and kind of going through those challenges without support will be extremely challenging. Thank you once again, Simon. So I think that was a very interesting discussion, and I'm sure you provided lots of useful advice to people who joined today and those who will watch the recording of the webinar. Now I want to pass it over to Sophie, who wanted to make some announcements about the future seminars and webinars as well. Sophie?
Thank you so much. And again, just another personal thanks to Simon for just sharing your story with us and everything you've been through. It's truly, really inspiring. So thank you. And thank you to Julia for your great moderation as well. As Julia mentioned, we do have an upcoming diversity and inclusion webinar coming up on the 22nd of February at 2 p.m. That one's quite closely related actually, and it's called Can We Have or Balance It All? And the talk will be delivered by a lady called Sam Finan from Standard Chartered. So if you're interested in that, then please do register for the event. You can do that by either showing as attending on LinkedIn and we'll sign you up, or you can register your interest to us at events@sisuc.org and we can do that for you again. But we'd love to see you attend the next session, and do look out for the link to the recording in your emails too. We'll be sending that over by the very latest the end of the week, but likely to be much sooner than that. But thank you all so much for joining again. Hope you have a lovely rest of the day and a lovely week ahead.
Thank you, Sophie. Thank you, Simon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye, everybody. Bye.